What's going on, guys? So, I'd like to ask a favor of everybody right now. Before we get into the video, go hit that like button. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe. Helps me out a lot. I truly appreciate it. Let's talk about it. Everybody wants to say that Bryan Kohberger is an incel. Everybody wants to say a lot of bad things about Dylan Mortensen, the roommate. As far as Dylan being in the frozen shock phase, I can't figure out why in the world she would have been, especially with her doing nothing outside of that. I did a live stream the other night. One of my friends was on there and she kept saying that it's completely possible that Dylan was in shock from what she had seen and went in the room and waited 8 hours. I don't believe that. I can't get on board with that. That makes no sense. Let's go over that, right? One more time. She heard what sounded like Kaylee playing with her dog upstairs. She looked out the room, saw nothing. She heard somebody say somebody was there. She looks out the room, saw nothing. Then she thought she heard someone crying. She heard a male say, "It's okay, I'm here to help." Then that last time when she opened her door and she looked out her room, she saw a man dressed all in black wearing a mask walking outside. Now, of course, that would be a good reason to be scared, right? But is it a good reason to be in shock? If you live in a sorority house where there's people all the time, you can't have it both ways. You can't go and say, well, she probably didn't think much about an intruder being in the house because there's people always there, and then turn around and say, well, she was in shock because she saw an intruder in her house. No, it doesn't work that way. She either just went back in and went to bed, or she was terrified and she was in shock. Can't have it both ways, right? Now, let's go back to Steve Gonsalves saying there was a hell of a battle going on the second floor. And now we know that Dylan was on the second floor. So she could hear all the other stuff. She could hear Kaylee playing with her dog, or what it sounded like Kaylee playing with her dog. We know it's not. She could hear a girl crying. She could hear a guy, "It's okay, I'm here to help." But she can't hear a struggle with one guy with a knife trying to kill two people on the same floor and the floor above her. You don't hear that? So when you look out the door, you're obviously not in a frozen shock phase. When you see a man walking out of your house, you're not in a frozen shock phase if you then shut and lock the door. So either she didn't think anything of it, or she was in a frozen shock phase. Can't be both. Now, as far as Bryan being an incel, I'm completely up to date on the Papa Roger stuff, right? Like, I understand that profile is an incel. Whoever runs the Papa Roger profile is an incel. I understand that major media is purporting that that could be Bryan, right? And nobody has come forward to say, no, I'm Papa Roger. No, it's not Bryan, it's me. And apparently nobody has posted from that account ever since Bryan's been arrested. So there's a good chance it could be Bryan. But if that is Bryan, yeah, sure, he's an incel. Involuntary celibate. That's what that means. That means I want girls, I want to have sex with girls, I want to have relationships with girls, but they don't want me. I have a hard time believing that. I'm not going to go and pretend that Bryan is the most attractive person in the world and you'd be crazy to think he couldn't get a girlfriend. But he's not that unattractive. Now, personality, yeah, maybe that plays a lot into it. But just as your average guy, average college student, he doesn't seem that far off the mark looks-wise. I mean, he looks like Ross from Friends. Tell me he don't. His personality, maybe he's just weird and creepy, but that's not what we've been told from people who know Bryan. Of course, back in middle school and elementary school, he was a short, fat little kid who people bullied and picked on him, and he had no confidence. But then we heard that in high school, he started boxing, he lost the weight, he became more confident, and he was mostly doing the bullying himself. So he wasn't just this, oh, please help me, I'm so sad, I can't do anything, nobody likes me type of person. We don't know anything about Bryan except for his education, and rumors that we've heard. We've had friends tell conflicting stories, right? We've had neighbors say that his dad asked him, will you be friends with my son? Can we hold that against Bryan? We all know parents can be weirdos. And maybe that guy took that way when maybe the dad actually said something like, hey, yeah, y'all might end up being friends. Who knows? That's not that abnormal. But people can take things and they can make it into something weird. Now, I'm not saying the dad isn't a weirdo and didn't say something weird. I'm not trying to say that guy's not telling the truth. I'm just saying, from a public perspective, we can't believe every little thing we find out. And right now, as far as the defense goes for Bryan, we haven't heard anything. They haven't given his side of the story. So for everybody who's completely convinced that this man did it and he's absolutely guilty and there's no chance he's innocent and there's no chance there's nobody else, we don't know what his story is. He could come out and say, I did it, but I was, pleading insanity. He could come out and say that he didn't do it, but he knows who did it. That somebody used his car. That he had left his phone in his car. The whole Brent Kopaka, whatever, the other BK guy, the one that was shot at Washington State.
We don't know what we don't know. However, on the body cam, there is a discussion about the SWAT shootout. And when I'm talking about the body cam, once again, I believe it was in Indiana. It was one of the officers who pulled him over with his father. They talked about that. They mentioned that. That's interesting to me as a defense lawyer. One of the things I'd want to know.
That could be a whole can of worms. Now, I'm not saying I believe that. I'm just saying that could be used, right? That just because you believe it or not doesn't mean that the defense might not use it.
The first things that I would have an investigator follow up on is, did they know each other? And can I show that they knew each other? Were they together on that evening? Did they have previous evenings when they were together? And you would explore all of that, and I certainly would not want to be wedded to what the client tells me. I've had cases where a client has told me 1, 2, or 3 stories that were all false.
The defense has frozen everything around the crime scene. They want to get in there and they want to find something that could exonerate Bryan. They want something to say that he didn't do it or that somebody else could have done it, that it could have been something. And as far as we know, like all they've told us so far on the cop side is that they have touched DNA from Bryan. We haven't heard if they got DNA from the victim's fingernails. We haven't heard if they have more of his DNA in blood or something like that on the floor in the crime scene mixed with the other victim's blood. We haven't heard all that. We haven't heard if they have blood or DNA inside Bryan's car. We haven't heard anything. We haven't heard that they found the knife, that they found the weapon used. All they have is a sheath with DNA.
Touch DNA is DNA that can be transferred to an object by physical contact. So if I were to just swipe my hand across this table here, then I could have left behind skin cells on the table that have my DNA. So some more commonly known sources of DNA are things like blood, saliva, and the main difference between those body fluids and touch DNA is that touch DNA just has so much less DNA. So there are some challenges associated with touch DNA.
That's not crazy to think that a defense could pick it apart. It's just not, because you seem like you have a solid case when you hear it, and it's just okay, yeah, I get it. It makes sense that he's the one that did it. Like, you could see it happening, but there's little things in it that could be torn to shreds, like the phone pings, like the touch DNA. All those things individually can be destroyed by a defense attorney. It can really bring in doubt. Remember, the defense attorney doesn't have to prove that Bryan didn't do it. The prosecution has to prove that Bryan did do it beyond a reasonable doubt. I know I say that a lot, but it's not easy.
A peace officer must be able to articulate to a court after the fact reasonable suspicion in order to stop, detain, or frisk a person. A peace officer must be able to articulate to a court after the fact probable cause to arrest a person. And finally, a jury or judge must find proof exists beyond a reasonable doubt to convict a person in a court of law. This level of proof is required to convict a defendant who is accused of committing a crime.
Now, I'm just a country boy over here talking on the internet, right? So you might not believe me, but let's believe what the lawyers have to say.
When you look at the evidence as a whole, I mean, this is a circumstantial case after all, right? When we bring everything together, yes, it does come across as a pretty strong case. But again, as criminal defense attorneys, our job is to dissect this evidence and not just look at it as a whole only, but to look at every single evidence and try and attack each evidence and poke holes, right, in the reliability of that evidence and the strength of that evidence to advocate for our client.
So there you go. It's not only me. It's not only other true crime YouTubers. This is reality. Now, is it possible that we don't know the full story and there's a lot more going on that the police already know about? Absolutely. And I hope they get it. I hope they nail whoever did this to the wall, and I hope they give them the worst punishment possible. This isn't about defending anybody. This is about being real. I'm not going to sit here like other YouTubers and say, oh yeah, we got the guy now. We just need to make sure that we convict him. No, we need to make sure that we convict the right person and everyone that was involved in the crime. Maybe that's only Bryan. Maybe there's more. Maybe it's somebody else completely. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel to see more. Have a great day, and we'll see you later.